Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Bradford Literature Festival. I want to thank you today for coming out and celebrating the arts and literature in Bradford. It's very important, and we're thankful you're all here. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce some really fantastic people. It's a lovely family, lovely siblings. We're here celebrating Shobha, Shashi, and Smitha today. So, if you guys, without further ado, welcome them onto the stage.
And are we back on? I think we are.
Hello, everybody. Very nice to see all of you here. Some familiar faces, hi, and some unfamiliar, and it's great to see all of you here because for me, this is a very, very unusual experience. I'm one of three. I'm the youngest of three, my brother Shashi, my sister Shobha, and myself. We live in 3 different continents. My brother lives in India, my sister lives in California, and I live in London. And I have been to Bradford Literature Festival before. Some of you will know me. Hi, Matt. And attended my talks on unconscious bias. But this is a little bit outside my comfort zone, but not because this is family. So it's a weird mixture in my head, if you like. So what we're doing today is essentially having a conversation with my siblings about this book that you see above. This is a book that my sister wrote. So before I go any further, I want Shobha to tell us a little bit about how this came to pass. Shobha.
First of all, hello. I'm so delighted to see so many of you here. As my sister said, it's very, very special that the 3 siblings are on stage together. I wish I could have brought my mother with me. She was very excited. All 3 of you on stage together, she said. So I've done a number of literary festivals as a children's author, but first time the 3 of us are here, so you're actually getting to see a premiere event. The book, well, I mean, I want to tell myself that I shouldn't keep saying this, but this is the truth. It wasn't something that I just thought up. I was approached by Penguin, who thought that a book on my mother would be something that people could learn from, because she is a very dynamic, and you'll discover it if and when you read the book, quite a remarkable woman in her 80s who has inspired the 3 of us in some ways to be what we are, but also inspired a number of other people, friends, neighbors, young people. She doesn't look at age when she develops a relationship. She's a very driven, indomitable force. And so I was persuaded to write the book. I mean, my brother sort of encouraged me as well. I told him I don't want to write a memoir. And he said, come on, you can write anything. You've written so many books, you should be able to do it. So I came up with a new idea of doing the book. And it is an individually written book. It's written by me, but I framed the book with a double narrative. And I have what is called, it's called Talking Nearby by Feminist Theorists. But essentially, I use my mother's voice, but I'm not ventriloquizing her. I'm not, actually using her voice, but I divide each chapter in a way that she is speaking as well as the narrator then speaks and sort of ties up loose ends. Additionally, each chapter is informed by an aphorism, well known from all over the world, but in strange ways, even though I picked them up from my own reading or the internet or anywhere, all of those aphorisms really tie into Mummy's own philosophy of life. So how did the book come about? I had some time. My mother is the mother of a very well-known gentleman as well, who I'm quite sure so many of you have come to see, it follows the timeline of a memoir, but it is not, every piece of her life. It's essentially chapters that are teachable vignettes. So that's how it came about.
Thank you for that, Shobha. I want to just start with chapter 1. I'm not going to be going through the book because there are books on sale outside, and my sister is going to be signing them, and I urge you to go and read it because, as Shobha has already said, it's not a biography about a woman you don't know. It's actually, especially for us women in the audience, it tells us a lot about being a woman, empowering ourselves. How do we grow beyond the life that we live and learn from it, whether you have challenges or not? So instead of going from one chapter to at the end and tell you the story, which is not purpose of my being here. I just want to start with chapter 1, though, and point out that our mother was born in a very little small town in Kerala. And you would know that when you read the book. But the reason I want to set the context in relation to this is because Kerala was a matrilineal society amongst many of us. So in other words, inheritance is from mother to daughter. And having a daughter being born in a home is one for celebration. I wanted to flag that up because there are a lot of assumptions about Indians and people in India, and they say, oh, you know, it's a boy is the only thing that's important, and when a girl is born, you know, it's not something that's so important. And my mother was the first-born child and a daughter and was hugely celebrated. So I wanted to ask both of you, and perhaps I'll ask you and then ask you, Shobha, do you think at all that this is relevant and may have influenced our mother unconsciously in how, you know, how she approached her life and the decisions she made? This idea of celebrating womanhood and being a girl child from birth.
I'm not so sure, actually. I mean, she certainly never mentioned it to us in these 87 years that she's been around. It hasn't loomed large in her mind. But she certainly, being the eldest, must have counted for something. She was also, as she remembers, the tallest for a long time, and constantly banging her head against the low thresholds of a house built in the 1930s. I don't know if you know, inheritance issues are a big thing, because even though it's matrilineal in terms of inheritance, authority was always wielded by either the brother of the woman, or in this case, because it was for a while a nuclear family, her husband. That is my grandmother, our grandmother's husband, our grandfather, who was a school teacher but who called the shots in the family. So I don't think my mother really grew up automatically feeling empowered by her
What do you think?
heritage.
Well, I mean, I don't think necessarily being a daughter is what empowered her, but being the firstborn child. And I do say that actually in the chapter, that the confidence she got from being born into a home where her father was known as the man who got Reader's Digest and National Geographic from abroad, known as the man who everybody went to get English translations done. It all empowered her because she grew up in this celebrated home. I'm sorry. I've recovered from a cold, but I'm having... So she was a very confident young girl. She slept on a bed rather than on a mattress on the floor. And this is because she was the firstborn and she was her father's favorite. In addition, you'll discover in that first chapter that he was a very unusual man. In the old days, because of our Marumakatayam, which is this matrilineal tradition, he would have actually moved into his wife's home, which is what a lot of the husbands do. Yet he got married in his 30s, which is considered a little bit later, and he had already built a home for himself before he got married, because he said, my wife is not going to live in the ancestral home, we're going to live in our own home. So my mother grew up under the, with the large sort of shadow that was cast by her impressive father. And I'm sure that there is some empowerment and some confidence that comes from being Karatani's daughter. So I can't say it's necessarily because she was a girl, but she was brought up. All of the children were brought up to say that girls and boys can do the same. I mean, we can all do it. And my mother went to, I don't want to give away all of the book, but she went to a co-educational school where she ended up finally, before she graduated, as head girl or head prefect or whatever the title is, where you're the person in charge. So that's pretty remarkable.
School captain or something.
School captain, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to jump into chapter 4, only because we're living, we're here in Bradford in the United Kingdom. And in chapter 4, Shobha tells us a story about how our mother and her husband, her newly wedded, they were just married, arrived in London. And this was a woman who was from a little small town in Kerala, who spoke only Malayalam, which is our mother tongue, and then arrived in London. And so what I want Shobha to do, because she's written this beautifully, and that, as Shobha was mentioning to all of you, she's got a beautiful quote in each chapter from somebody fairly well known, and then you actually hear the voice of our mother, and then she writes about, if you like, life lessons learned from that particular part of her time. So if you could
How
just
much of
read
it?
the bit that I've marked with the pen, you can see that?
Or just this much?
Just that much, yeah.
So this chapter is titled Embrace the Unexpected. And you'll discover that Lily was not meant to go to London after she got married, but was to go and join her husband in Calcutta. She went with a little maid from the village, and then by the time she got there to Calcutta, her husband said, well, England has given me another offer. Would you like to go to London? And she didn't know what that meant, but it was an adventure and it sounded exciting. And they had to get her a passport and all of that. So that's the sort of context for reading this chapter. It starts also with a quote, as I said, you have to take risks. And this is by Paulo Coelho, the writer who wrote The Alchemist. You have to take risks. We will only understand the miracle of life fully when we allow the unexpected to happen. I left the sheltered life of a small town in Kerala for the big city of Calcutta soon after my wedding. It was a time of anticipation, the newness of a man and a marriage, and the excitement of not knowing what could happen in the days ahead. But within a week of my arrival in the city, my husband announced that his former boss had written him a letter offering him a better position in London. What a surprising twist of fate. Chandran was excited, but I, at first, was confused. And then it goes on, the maidservant would have to be sent back to Kerala, we had to apply for a passport, etc., etc. So the chapter follows like that, and I distinguished each chapter with the italics as being my mother's voice, and the rest of it, sort of the omniscient narrator, which is me.
So, Aunt, thank you for that show. I'll hang on to it for the moment. Unconnected to the book, my son, who's in the audience, Nihal, decided to do a personal family desert island discs. I'm sure all of you know desert island discs, with our mother. So I just want to play a very short...
I should mention it was her favorite program when she was in London.
Well,
She learnt English from Roy Plumley.
She's going to just mention that herself. So I thought you might like to hear our mother's voice, literally, because I've taken a very tiny clip from it for you to hear that. And it's, in case you can't understand a strong Malayali accent, I've got subtitles out there as well. So thanks for that, Nihal.
So later somehow managed to get to London and didn't even know a word of English. So Papa bought a radio for me and then I put it on all the time. Only English program.
Desert Island Discs. Did you listen to Desert Island Discs?
The one was this. Every Monday at this time, a well-known person asked the question, which gramophone record do you choose with you when you go to a desert island?
Did I?
As usual, Roy Plumley, like that, whatever they say, in Malayalam I write it down. So I had an inquiring mind. I mean, I wanted to survive with my strength. And I still do it, you see.
So that's our mother. And Desert Island Discs then became her most favorite program, listening to music that she had not heard, Western classical those days, this is 1955, and Western classical music that she had not known, and hearing people that she'd never heard of, and writing it down in Malayalam and teaching herself to speak English. That's just to give you an example of the kind of remarkable woman our mother is. But I want to come back to both of you. Both of you also, our mother came to London from a small little town and did not speak English. But we obviously were more privileged and came, brought up speaking English and so on. But you both left the country of your birth at a very young age. I wonder whether both of you can tell us, the audience, a little bit about that experience of your arriving at the age of, I think it was 19, 18?
19.
19, and you were also
19.
My father was 19 and my mother was there. Everyone
That's
left
my point.
at 19.
So all three of you were 19 years old at different, obviously different calendar years. So tell us, the audience, a little bit about that experience. Perhaps you can start and then I'll show.
No, what I remember specifically was, I was of course born here, so my story is slightly different from the rest of you, but my parents had moved back to India when I was two and a half. And then I was going to go to graduate school in the States. I won a scholarship. I was 19. And I thought we'd stop in London on the way and spend a week or two. We had relatives and friends here. A younger brother of my father's had remained in England and settled here from the 40s onwards. And there were other friends, so it seemed to be a good thing to do for a couple of weeks. But one of the things that I specifically remember is Dad gave me the address of the first place he had stayed when he came at the age of 19, in Hounslow. And I actually went to that particular place and I asked to see the very room in which he had stayed. And I stood at the window looking out with my 19-year-old eyes, imagining what this 19-year-old Indian boy had imagined way back in 1948. And for me, it was a particularly sort of moving experience. I don't think that the landscape before him, which was these grimy industrial kind of brick buildings, had changed very much since those days. And I came in, 1975, so that was 27 years later than he had done. And it was a very sort of empathetic experience, feeling myself in my father's shoes. But yes, you're right, some things are very different. Dad, too, was sort of teaching himself English, though I think they'd all learned English rudimentarily as a second language, but nothing that... whereas in our case, we studied in the English medium, as we say in India, and we were a little more comfortable with all of that when we got here. But nonetheless, that was my experience, and I still remember going about everywhere in a jacket and tie because I thought that was the expected thing to do in England. And I think in most of the places I was invited, I was the only one wearing a jacket and tie. So, one had to get adjusted to the realities, as it were. But Shobha went a couple of years, 4 or 5 years later to America.
Much later, yeah.
And not to England, right? Did you come here?
No, I came here to get a foreign experience before I arrived in college, because we got the passport for the first time when I got a scholarship to go as an undergraduate. He was 19, he went to school really early and came to do his PhD. Grad school was much later. I applied when I was, you don't need to go into the Indian system, but he graduated senior Cambridge, which is where you finish school and the papers are corrected in Cambridge and all of that, so it's very English. And a lot of the universities in America were very familiar with that system. By the time I got to apply, and I applied because my brother was doing his PhD in the US, and my father had always said, my girls and boys, if they're capable, that's fine, but I can't afford to send you. He went on a scholarship. If you get a scholarship, you can go, but otherwise, you just study in India. And so that was the rule, and I applied, and initially I got admission, and so I would have come a year earlier, and he would have still been in the US, but nobody gave me aid, so I turned it down. And then by the time I got the full scholarship, I'd already done about 6 months of college in India, in Calcutta. So I came, and he had already left. So it was a whole different adventure, because when you come abroad, that's why, for Mummy, she came with her husband. Shashi did come on his own, but I came thinking, well, my brother, my big brother, somewhere in America. I had never even gone abroad before. And I arrived, and there wasn't a soul. In fact, my father had to ask other people who had friends of friends to pick me up from the airport and drive me to college.
And you didn't have much money.
We had
Neither of you arrived on the shores of the West
with no money,
flush with money in your pocket. I mean, you were struggling to achieve. You cleaned windows for a while just to earn some money.
No, that was for some.
We were not coming from wealthy, privileged, upper middle class, rich backgrounds. We came from education. That was our experience.
No, also, sorry to interrupt, but a scholarship in America is essentially September to May, so they cover you for that. And one of the stories I tell my children about how anything is possible, which is, of course, our mother's dictum as well, but which I genuinely discovered with some of the Indian chutzpah I had, is that I went and made an appointment with the director of financial aid, told them, would you pay for summer, because I can't afford to go back to India. And he started laughing, saying, in the history of our college, nobody's been given a full ride. You have a full scholarship as well as, tuition, room, board, everything. And you're now asking for summer money? And because we grew up in India, where, as I said, I call it chutzpah, but it's essentially an ability to sort of think a little outside the box, which I think our mother had given us. I said, well, college in America is 4 years, and I will graduate in 2. So why don't you pay for the summer? So that's what they did, and I did graduate in 2. So what I was saying is, and you finished your PhD in, he did a master's and a PhD and all of that in 3 years, right? Which is why he'd already left before I came, because we didn't want to run out of any money.
Okay, no, I'm just kind of trying to find different vignettes from the book to help you understand a little bit about our mother, but also about how she influenced us and the decisions that we made as we went through life. Shobha was recently interviewed on BBC Sheffield, and you shared an interesting story about voiceover, and I thought about our mom and about your connection to that, and I wonder whether you could share that with the audience, because not everyone would have heard that.
Oh. Well, I think my brother remembers this because he's told me about it while I was researching about the book and talking to my siblings and looking things up and getting more information. One of the stories that I asked my mother, and she said, well, don't you know I used to be a voiceover act. I did voiceovers, she said. I think she called it voiceovers. Or did she call it something else? Is it dubbing? No, I don't know.
I can't remember now, but that's what she did, yeah.
She did do voiceovers, and this was, we're talking about when my sister and I were toddlers in Bombay. But the way it came about was her smartness of seeing something in the newspaper about the Films Division Corporation of India and marching herself there and basically saying, well, I speak really good Malayalam. Are you looking for a Malayalam voice? And I sing well as well, and I'd love to be a voiceover talent. Fast forward, once I gave up working in the non-profit disability arena, I also launched a career of being a voiceover talent, and I have done a number of voiceovers. And it was interesting when I did this research, because I didn't remember this, that my mother was actually a family member who did voiceovers, and here I am now, I'm a professional voice talent, so that's kind of a fun story.
It's a fun story, only because, yes, you were going to say?
No, she'd often drag me along with her, so I'd go along. And
yeah,
hang
you
around
told me that
while-
later, that you
while
went
she
to the
was
studio
recording,
with her.
Because in order
And
of
she did a lot of
birth,
Films
left to
Division
right,
films. She
brother,
even did.
sister, and I.
She even did
So
a
he
couple
has
of commercials. as I
other
remember,
memories, yeah.
advertisements.
Koodi Koodi Verunna Lavanyam.
That's right.
Which we still can't find, but that was her favorite one.
That was her favorite commercial.
And she did a really good
It's a
job.
Malayalam commercial, and not everyone.
It's about soap, and her lovely lilting voice is describing in Malayalam the pleasures of sort of lathering with some fancy soap.
Okay, just for fun, I'm going to go completely somewhere else now. And I'm going to page 37, and the chapter is Moving Back, Moving Forward, chapter 5. But if you could, Shobha,
Right.
I've again marked it here, you've returned the page, start from there, and
Okay.
it's about fashions. My mother was a fairly cool lady, so I just thought, let me just read this. If you can read from here, and then it ends there, just the one
Okay.
paragraph.
Sure.
Thanks.
Lily enjoyed dressing up, adopting new fashions and trying new hairstyles. She remembers that she wore a sleeveless sari blouse with trousers on one occasion and turned heads at the club. Someone asked her sarcastically if she was starting a new fashion. She may have protested at the questions when it was asked, but soon she noticed other women adopting the sartorial style. Lily was a trendsetter. She had an inner confidence that told her she was quite special and exceptional.
So in relation to that, Shashi left for Delhi University. We were growing up in Calcutta, and he was always a precocious child, so I think he left when he was 3.5. No, I'm
16.
kidding.
15, well, you just turned 16.
He was not yet 16.
No, I was 16.
You were 16, okay. And he would come back for school, his college holidays. And tell us the story, Shash, about when you came back from your school holidays.
It started
and
earlier.
Our mother had this really modern outfit for you.
It started early because I was actually a rather short kid until suddenly I shot up.
Yeah, we're all
You
late
shot up in
puberty.
college, though.
No, I shot up in class 11. So if you look at my class photographs in 9, and I'm one of the shortest kids in the class, and in 11, I'm one of the tallest. So at that point already, Mummy started resorting to unorthodox tactics. And one of the things she did, in those days, bell-bottoms were the rage in the cusp of the 70s. So she actually she took my long trousers and altered them with additional material. So there was this kind of triangle cut here with that same material and then extra material at the bottom. So I've created
whole
these
different
flares
colour.
of a whole different color. It didn't match at all.
And he was so embarrassed.
And I was extremely embarrassed to wear these.
What can I say? He's
But-
not fashionable.
But she said, think of it as a new fashion.
And in fact, did she not make shirts with old saris? So
No,
imagine that.
No,
made
she
shirts
made
for
us
me
a
as well.
skirt with
A skirt with old
a
saris.
patchwork skirt.
Yeah.
Because she had gone to
She did a patchwork
London.
shirt as well for me.
Well, maybe she did. I don't know.
There you
But I
go.
do remember the patchwork skirt. She came to London at the time of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and all of that, 1971, I think, on a ladies' tour. So she was women she didn't know, but she wanted to go abroad and go back to London where she'd birthed my brother and all of that, and said, I'm going to go on holiday. And so she went on this tour, came back with all kinds of ideas, and she definitely had a little frugality that came both from her mother and her father. And that meant you don't waste things, and we've all got it. We've all got that.
That's for sure. That's
Yeah.
for sure, but that's
Yeah.
something else. But yeah. Okay, I'm going to go on to something a little bit more serious. When our father was
Aren't they
38
allowed to
years
ask
old...
questions?
Pardon me?
Don't they get to ask questions? Or?
They will, only... But I'm
Not yet.
getting a mark. You're getting worried that we won't have time.
Sorry.
Don't worry, I am managing the audience. They will definitely ask questions. She's fed up with my questions. That's
No,
what
I
happens.
love
Let's
your
say
questions. I love your questions. I just thought it's.
I am watching the time, yeah.
Thank you, darling.
Our father had a very serious heart attack at the age of 38 and was in ICU for something like six weeks. At that point, I was 6, my sister was 8, my brother was 12. We were little. This was in Bombay. And I, at the age of 6, I just liked the hospital food, I remember that. But beyond that, I didn't understand the seriousness of what could have happened to our lives. But of course, it would have changed our mother. So, what do you think that our mother has learned? And it's a two-part question. And you have learned because of this life experience. You can go first and then Shashi.
Obviously, for my mother, it was a huge shock. As she said very often, she was not an educated, convent-educated woman like we had been. She also had only just graduated high school. My father was the breadwinner, was the anchor, was the financial support. She had, a brilliant and precocious young son who had all kinds of opportunities ahead of him, and girls that were growing up as well. And it made her feel very insecure. But again, as one of the chapters illustrates, each life experience sort of informed her particular sort of approach to life and how she should do the things that she should do. So how did it affect her? It made her insecure on the one hand that she was not educated and that she was too dependent on another person. On the other hand, it taught her that you have to be able to count on yourself in order to live in this world. And she did a number of things. Again, it's all in the book. She did a correspondence course to get a little bit more of a degree. At some stage, she even applies for a job and actually gets the job. She thought she couldn't do very much, but she was very, very aware. And she was also very aware, which is a very Indian thing, that they didn't have a roof over their head, because my father was a top executive in a newspaper, and we lived this very sort of rarefied, exciting life, and it's described in the book. But she knew that if he went, all of that would go too. So that insecurity was definitely there.
Shash, obviously you were 12, and your memory of that would have been
Yeah, but I think
quite
Shobha's
different.
answered it perfectly. I don't really have anything to add to that. She was obviously deep. I remember being present in the hospital room when she went and berated Daddy lying in bed at that time, saying, how could you have done this to me? Where would I have been? What would have happened to the children? That's why the poor man is just lying in a hospital bed recovering from a heart attack. That was Mummy.
Well, why would I remember?
And I was quite cross with her about that, but I also understood the gravity of what she was going through. But it didn't change her, essentially, I think, except for that added element of uncertainty. I remember dedicating one of my books to her, what was it, Divine Discontent.
Right.
She was always somebody who was never, ever satisfied with anything. And that's something which can be tough for children growing up in a household, because everyone reacts differently to these things. I think all three of us somehow live with it, but nothing I did was ever good enough for her. Nothing Daddy did was ever good enough. No gift that Daddy bought her did she ever say she liked, even on her birthday or the anniversary. Um, for her, there was always something better that we had to strive for.
Aspirational.
And you know,
constantly.
it could have driven us all into a deep, dark hole of depression and inadequacy, but somehow it didn't. Somehow,
And then it
you
would
know,
be a misery memoir, except this is actually a tribute to
Yeah.
mummy as well
Very
as a
uplifting,
tribute to women everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting that you're saying this, Shash, and I'm sorry, I'm going to add,
go for
add
it.
to it. What's fun in some ways, and I'm listening to the three of us on stage, is that you all get an opportunity to hear. Well, Smitha has asked the question. She hasn't really talked about her own memories of mummy here
I have
at
a
this
different job
point.
today.
But what I was going to say is, we're getting different perspectives. Obviously, as the firstborn, as the son, as the older brother, my mother must have put certain kinds of pressures on him that she didn't on us. We had pressures of, yes, you know, you can do much more. We were never allowed to be idle. We didn't get to lie down at night, you know, lie down in the afternoon. Today, on the other hand, she berates us all the time because she says, you're all machines, you don't ever take a break.
She's
And we
fine
have
with
to
that.
remind her that we were raised that way.
Excuse me,
Some
Mom.
of us take more breaks than others, and this is said as a
no,
sister.
I absolutely.
But some of us don't know how to take a break, and that's the truth.
And well, it's what it is. But I think certainly the idea of firstborn, I mean, those of you who have siblings, and if you are not the firstborn or you are the firstborn, you know, think about the pressure that is unconsciously put upon the firstborn. You know, I have 3 children, and there is no question that my firstborn has had more pressure than his siblings, purely because I haven't got a clue what I'm doing, and we just kind of figure it out along the way. And then you learn from that, and that's what happens. So firstborns, and I'm the youngest, so guess what? It's an easy one. I like being the youngest. I'm happy to be the youngest. But yeah, so I just wanted to bring that aspect of it in as well.
Thank you.
I want you to read one more bit, show, from page 71, which is called The School of Life.
The school of life. Your choices, your actions, and your experiences are your best teacher. A.C. Grayling said that yesterday as well, in some ways.
But our mother has already said it. Sorry.
Lily had been a conductor of her children's life experiences, but she was a student of life as well. She had lived long enough to know that everyone reaches at least one crossroad in their life, and often not by their own choice. Crossroads may be scary, but she was determined to think of them as a place of opportunity and never overthink any of her decisions. It was part of the courage with which she had approached everything in life.
Thanks, Shu. So when we think about that and life lessons that we have learned, what has it taught? I'd like to know what you have learned with your own life experiences. Either of you, both of you? I want to hear from both of you.
You want to go first or
It's
should
too
I?
vast a question. I'm afraid we'd spend the entire afternoon
Give
doing
me one
that.
example.
No, I think
have
you know,
an answer.
we are all shaped by our experiences inevitably, and you know, I've had more than my fair share of experiences. I'm not sure which one to talk about. But growing up with mummy, I mean, was certainly an education itself. And I think one thing that's been rather wonderful for me, as I think I mentioned in the prologue, is that we really had a difficult relationship throughout my childhood and my early adulthood. And now I find myself in this situation where she's living with me at her oldest and most vulnerable. And it's just amazing how close we've become and the genuine sort of love and tenderness I feel and the kind of, I indulge her in ways that she never indulged me when I was growing up. So it's a curious
That's
sort
my
of
next
role
question,
reversal.
funnily enough,
Yeah,
but okay.
yeah.
So you've hijacked my next question, but that's
Sorry
fine.
about that.
But yeah, so maybe you should continue with that, and then I'll go back to the original question to you, Sho. So, you know, because obviously you lived in another country, and then you moved to India, and Mom has been with you since 2009 for a couple of years.
2019.
But has been with you since 2020 permanently. And tell us a little bit more, and explain a little bit more. You started that.
Well, she came for a month at the end of 19, and then we went off for this wonderful reunion with the whole family, all her descendants and their spouses and their children all got together in Cancun, Mexico for New Year's. And then we came back, and unfortunately, COVID struck. So she was on the verge of returning to Kerala after what would have been about 3 months or 4 months away, mostly spent with me in Delhi and Shobha in California. No, I mentioned that. But then when COVID struck, she got stranded. And of course, she got used to the rhythms of life at home. We had a lockdown that lasted for quite a long time. And at the end of it all, I think it just seemed natural to insist that she basically continue her life with me. I think now she's reached a stage where some things have changed fundamentally for her. She was always the self-reliant one, and we've all talked about this, and Shobha's written it in the book. Somebody who, well into her 80s, insisted on being totally self-sufficient. She drove herself. Can you imagine an Indian woman in her 80s driving herself to the market and farther? She would refuse to hire a full-time servant or cook or domestic helper. She wanted somebody to come in for a few hours to clean because she was rather messy and hated cleaning. But everything else, if a guest came by for a cup of tea, she'd go and make it herself. She was very, very self-reliant. And suddenly to see such a person transforming into somebody who was really quite almost excessively dependent, that has been sad and sobering, but it also shows that in some ways that's what happens when you let go. So I keep telling myself, what I've learned from watching her is that, you know, as long as you want to stay focused and relevant, don't let go. But once you let go, the decline gets very quick and very steep.
That is so true. To
What
come
was
back
the
to the
origin?
earlier question, Shoa, because I don't want to lose that, because I think it's important. You know, Mum and Mum's life experiences and the actions and choices that she has made, what has it taught you? Even if just one thing.
Oh, it's taught me so much. I was very fortunate that she came. I gave her her only granddaughter. She had 3
7
grandsons.
grandchildren, exactly.
7 grandchildren, and there's the only special one, as she calls it, her one granddaughter. And so she did come often to see me. And the granddaughter, I mean, the boys are all lovely and she loves them all equally, but boys, getting them to sit down and sort of necessarily want to engage, which of course Nihal has done as a grown-up young man, but when he was little, I mean, they're not as interested in hanging out with grandma, whereas my daughter did. So it was sort of her place of preference. She would come very often. I was very fortunate to see that. And I have been influenced by her in that she is one of those who doesn't feel very sorry for herself. She's not much of a moaner. She is, if something is, you know, even, I picked up this cold because we were playing Scrabble and she had a cold and I got a cold and whatever. But, you know, I told her, Mom, you have a cold, I have to go get this, we have to do that, we have to get a humidifier. It's just a cold and I'm going to be fine. So everything, I'll be fine tomorrow, just get me some Axe oil, you know. So nothing sort of makes her feel down. She's got to an age now where, if anything keeps her down, is that we're out of her eyesight and she wants to see us all the time. But otherwise, she's a very pragmatic approach to living. She doesn't let any kind of misery affect her. So those are the things that I think I've tried to be that way. She also is someone who doesn't believe in wasting time, as I said. That time is precious and we need to utilize it. Even if it's reading a book, that's fine.
That's changed now.
Yeah, well, now she's telling us to take naps and things, which we don't do. Yes.
Yeah, we were our Indian household. Napping in the afternoon is not heard of, doesn't happen. This is hot Calcutta, but no chance. Keep busy always. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I was just thinking, when our mum is no longer around at some point in the future, we will become nostalgic, as we all do when we lose people that we love. And so I was just wondering what kind of, you know, in advance, if you like, if you can think of a favorite quote of Mum's, possibly.
Oh, so many.
You have so many.
There's so many.
I have so many.
Well, one she even used in this clip from Nihal, survive on my own strength. That was something she constantly would talk about, surviving on my own strength, and so that was one thing. And the other was, for some reason, something stuck in my head is age and stage of life. At my age and stage of life, your age and stage of life, you be doing this, you be doing that. That age and stage of life.
It's really important, though, isn't it, Shash? Because this idea of age and stage in life, you know, survive of your own strength, that's a given. We've talked about that. But this age and stage of each of our lives, depending on wherever we are, is very important. So I think the combination of the two, you know, I think is a good phrase. So yeah, thanks for that. How about you, Sho?
Well, I mean, one of her phrases that has affected all of us, including the grandchildren, is that she always talked about having a focus in life. She said, if you have a focus in life, you can do anything you want. So it's people who don't bother to think. So A.C. Grayling, again, I'm sorry, I just remembered that yesterday I heard him. One of the things he said was, we need to live a considered life. And in some ways, that's exactly what my mother is saying, is that all of us need to think in terms of what do we want to get out of our day-to-day. And she says the people who have a focus in life are the ones who actually can get that. So
Actually,
it's something that I
talked about Dad at all, but he was much more concerned of what he could give to others from his life.
Yeah, whereas Mum
and my
was
mother was much more about what she could get out of life. And I think the combination is where we've all ended up.
So here's a question.
You haven't given him any credit in the
Just
story.
for fun,
I need to answer that, and it's very good because I have spoken about this book at a number of sort of salons or events like this, and a very dear friend who had met my father, he said exactly the same thing. He said, Shobha, you've got to write a book about your father. He was such a remarkable man. And I said, no, my father was a remarkable man, but the fact that he was remarkable is already sort of etched in any kind of lore that anybody knew the family with. He is a man who was revered, who was worshipped. My brother has written about him. Other people have written about him. My father was this incredible person, whereas my mother, women very often, if they are, and we've heard it, it's all old news, but if you're assertive, you're called aggressive. If you're pushy, if you're dynamic and driven, you're called pushy. You have all of this kind of thing. I thought it was very important for me to recognize that women, all of us in different ways, we hold up, it's not my phrase, evidently Mao Zedong said it first, but Cheryl Boudin is the one who used it, hold up half the sky, and yet so often all the heroes in the books are the men. And so as a daughter who knew her well, who very often was sort of told, oh, you're just like your mother, but wasn't necessarily said
as a compliment.
As a compliment, now I wear it as a badge of honor. The fact that I am what I am and it's considered that I'm like my mother is actually a great thing. And it was one of the reasons why, it's not the reason I wrote the book, but it's good that I was the one writing it.
Exactly. So two questions before I open it to questions from the audience. One is a quote, not a question, just for fun, because you've said what you have. So I don't know if it happens in the West, but certainly in India, when children are born, they're always like somebody. They're not themselves. Oh, that one is so much like his mother. That one is so much like, we just can't help ourselves. So who do you think we are like? Shash, are you like our mom or your dad or a bit of both or what?
I used to think I was a clone of my father, but I've begun to realize, as I've grown older, that there's an awful lot of mom in me as well. So, one finds out as one grows up, I think.
So I think, I would love to say I'm a perfect mix, but I don't think my siblings would agree. I think I have a lot, I understand my mother extremely well, and I won't let any of my siblings say I don't, because I do. I understand her as a woman as well as and she's a woman too, but what I mean is I'm just saying I understand my mother. I've spent the most time with her. I get her. So in that sense, I suppose I'm a little bit like her, but I'm not really. As we've sort of observed, all of us over the years, I think my brother is a lot like my mother. He's a very incredibly large force, and he's very driven and all of that. But he's got it, but he has, well, not fully, but you remember it that way. But you've got a certain sort of gentler, less strident aspect to him that is different. My mother was, I don't think she was necessarily gentle and unstrident. You, I think, are much more like Daddy.
Much more like Daddy than Mummy, yeah. Absolutely. Okay, we're going to end, but so this book has a foreword written by my brother, an afterword written by the only granddaughter my mother has, Shobha's daughter, and in the afterword, Ragini, my niece, has a quote of my mother's. So I want you to just read just the quote that my mother says.
In the context of the paragraph?
Yeah, well, it would make sense when you read it. And then we'll open to question and answer. It kind of draws everything together for me. Just hear our mother's voice.
I think we need to read the whole paragraph.
Sure, fine, you're the boss.
Otherwise it doesn't make sense. Amama often laments that she was not born in her children or grandchildren's generation. If she'd had her education, she says, she would have been on top of the world. She would have reached heights higher than even Ambani's Antilia. Some of you may know what that is. I am from the village, she says, and with my background and my knowledge and education, and coming from my life with my limited exposure, I have made so much of my life.
Thank you. Okay, open to questions. This question answer is about this book, not about Ambedkar. Shashi is doing a talk on Ambedkar. If any of you want to talk about Ambedkar and ask questions about Ambedkar, go to his talk and ask questions then. So no Ambedkar questions, but any other questions, all yours.
On the book.
Or about politics or anything else, yeah. And I just wanted to say one thing, because Smitha said something about the prologue and the afterword. He has done the good deed of signing the prologue. So if you're not interested in my signature, even though I'm the author of the book, you will get Shashi's signature as well, but you will get mine. So just to let you know, if you buy the book.
Go ahead.
Hi, it's great to see all three of you in one stage.
Thank you.
I know that coming from Kerala, that Lily is an unusual name for a Hindu woman at that time. At that time, could you comment about how that name came about?
Absolutely, it's a very good question. And you know, we have more than one Lily in the family. My father's older brother was married to a Lily as well. So that's unusual. But my mother's name is actually Sulekha, which is an ironic and a very beautiful name. It means good script. And she has the worst handwriting in the world, she'll admit it. But her name was Sulekha, that's what she was registered in school as and all of that. But she was a very, very light-skinned, beautiful little child. And she was definitely her father's pet. And when he built his house, he named it Lily Cottage. And so he called her Lily, because this is a cottage for Lily in some ways. So she always sort of thought, when I was growing up, I thought the cottage was named for my mother, but that's not true. The house he bought, he named Lily Cottage, and then he said, well, she is the Lily. I mean, she's just perfectly sort of pink and lovely and fair and all of that, so she's Lily. That's how the name came about.
I've assured her that when I finally build my retirement home in Thiruvananthapuram, it'll be called Lily Cottage. So we can bring her around full circle.
Full circle, exactly.
You will. Yeah, more power to her.
Hello everyone, I'm Sanjida and I'm from Kolkata.
Oh, lovely.
So I'm a student of literature, so I'm quite interested to know about the title of this book, especially the subtitle.
Yeah,
where
I was very cross with Chopin on the title of the book.
That's because he doesn't
hasn't got a clue
remember.
is
Now
what they
here you hear the siblings and their banter.
and
The subtitle I gave her.
Yeah,
The
so,
title is hers.
okay.
That's the quote I thought one of you will come up with.
No, well, it doesn't say as much as a focus on
So I
life.
just wanted to ask,
So it's a good question. If you ask Mummy how you doing, she always says I've had good innings. It's something that if you ask my children, who've spent a lot of time with them, one of the things, if you ask them to quote, what does Mummy say? It's focus on life, I can do anything better, whatever you can do, I can do better, as well as good innings. So she,
But she doesn't know anything of cricket.
she doesn't know,
One end of a bat from the
he
other.
thinks it's unfair that I used the term, even though she didn't really know or understand or enjoy cricket. But it is quintessentially my mother. And there's a basketball reference, and I'm sorry my brain is a little fried and I can't remember it, but there's another wonderful sports metaphor that she uses, and it's there in the book, which, we hear in basketball all the time. I'm trying to remember what it is.
And she doesn't know anything about basketball.
She doesn't know anything about basketball either. So she's picked up some very wonderfully descriptive, colorful phrases just from the 6 newspapers that my father subscribed to every day. So good innings came from that. And so, well, he says he remembers giving the subtitle. Maybe he did. I may have given him the title and said, do you approve of it? And he improved it for sure. Full credit. We're all huge fans of Shashi Tharoor.
And I said, this is a biography of a cricketer. You're writing a book called Good
He
Innings.
did tell me, and I had to fight it, but it's good because, usually if our big brother, Dada, tells you, no, you can't use that title, I said, I insist on using that title, and it's the perfect title.
He was vetoed, let's put it that way,
Yeah.
on this one. Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Shaini and I come from Kerala.
Hi.
Yeah, hi. So one thing that you told, that mother was never satisfied of whatever you are. I think now being a mother, I feel that is a character of a mother. So
Not every mother.
yeah, so when my mother also did the same thing, like anything that's happening in the house, it's like, it could have been done better, which always my father's like, why is your mother like this? But now I feel it. However, as a kid, you don't always take it in the positive sense at that time. So it's same happening here. So how did you overcome that particular, situation rather the doctors call it as a child meltdown. Don't tell that to your kid. It brings your kid down. But we do that.
You're sounding very rational, if it could have been done better. When it could not have been done better, my mother would still complain. And there are two possible reactions for a firstborn. One is to actually constantly excel, and the other is to just go off and take drugs and run off and join a commune or something. It so happened that I had a talent for coming first in everything I did, and so I did have that to point to. But it was maddening because I never got a single congratulation. So coming first in class, first in the school, first in the state, first in India. It made no difference for her. Oh, he did better. That person was. I mean, that's my mother. So it was one of those experiences in life which made me, I suppose, a bit of a high achiever. Just even though I knew it was impossible to satisfy her, at least would try. That sort of thing.
Well, the good news is
but I mean, these girls didn't get a fraction of the pressure I got.
And
So
don't
they were
forget,
very
I'm the
lucky.
youngest one, so I'm
Yeah, that
quite-
is true. We didn't. We
quite lucky.
didn't. And yeah, we probably had it quite easy.
quite easy in comparison.
But that's partly, I have young children who have come to me now after reading the book as well. Not young children, I'm sorry, older children, teenagers who've also read the book. And they said one of the things they wished is that their parents had pushed them a little bit more.
Tiger Mom, remember?
Well, Mummy wasn't a tiger mom. She hardly, once we went abroad, in those days it was $12 a minute to call from America. So, I left home at the age of 19, and that was it. My father wrote me lovely letters, which I enjoyed reading and looked forward to. My mother wrote a little in her sloppy hand, but it's only when I came home finally that I saw her. So the influence was for a very short period of our lives. And of course, as long as he was home, but he left home at 16, he, because of who he was, got all of the attention. Sometimes that's a problem as well. And you can tell your daughter is that, at least if a parent is watching what you're doing and giving you ideas and encouraging you to do more, that's a plus. It's not a minus, as they say. It's something that allows you to do more than what you're capable of doing. We find in the West, and I don't know if this happens in schools here, but when I was raising children in America, I remember that the whole philosophy used to be children would literally have an art class and draw, something that was pretty bad. Now, the parents would say, this is fabulous, it's wonderful, it's great. I would usually say, well, if it looked like it didn't make any sense, I would say, well, what is it you're drawing? So we'd learnt enough from Mum to know that it can be painful to say this is crap. But on the other hand, I just couldn't say, oh, that's so lovely, darling, let me give you a big hug, if it was literally a splash of ink that the kid threw on the piece of paper because she wasn't interested. So, we grew up in a generation where it was all right. And I've met people who are the age of my children who wished, truly say, our mother didn't ask us any questions, you've done all of this, look at your kids, they're doing all these things, and I wish I'd been asked. So, it's never a win-win as a mom.
Of course not.
Sorry. That's how it is.
Yeah, another question.
Hi, lovely to see you all, and fascinating. Lovely seeing you all bickering together as well. I like that.
Sorry, you can't hear.
Yeah, I can't hear you either.
You've got to, yeah, it's not that loud.
Hello?
That's
Yes.
better. You
I'll
hold it
shout.
closer to you. That's it.
Yeah, I was just saying it's lovely to see you bickering. It's reminding me of me and my siblings, which is lovely. I wanted to know what your mum thinks of it all. So what was her initial, when you first said that you were going to be writing this, what did she think? And now that you've written it?
I'm still finding it difficult to understand you.
And has she read it? And what does she think? Did
What
she
did Mum
have
think of the book?
veto rights?
That's a very good question, because as soon as the book came out, and it was launched in India last year on Mother's Day, May 8th, we had a big event. We all went there, and I was on stage. My brother unveiled the book, and people came and gave my mother gifts. And, she didn't come up on the stage. She finds it hard to climb. And she got the book. She was very happy for all the attention. I told her to read it. She didn't read it right away. I said, aren't you interested in reading the book? All my friends are asking me, what do you think of it? So the first thing she said, and this could have been hurtful, but the first thing she said is, well, the book is good, but you didn't say that I read to the blind for so many years. And I said, I'm so sorry, Mother, but I actually don't remember that.
I remember it well.
Actually, funnily enough, I do
And
too.
well, that's now, because after she said it to all of us a million times. But I don't remember it as something she did when I was growing up. I really don't. And I wrote the book. I did give my siblings an opportunity to
You
share
know why,
stories.
Shobha? Because they moved to Bombay in 80 and then
I had
she was doing
already
it regular.
left. I had left, whereas you were
knew
here.
that, yeah.
So it must have happened, and I told her that. It must have happened after I left the country. And neither of your other children told me to put that in the book when I asked them, are there any particular stories I should write? So, I mean, I can't take full blame for it, but if we have another edition, we'll put it in. And the book got translated into Malayalam, and I insisted that they write about that. So here's an answer like what Shashi said. Instead of saying, this is a great book, I'm proud of you, she said, well, you forgot to write this. However, she is very proud of all of us. And she has told me many times later that she's so proud of me. And every time I go to a literary festival and come back, with flowers, and I go give it to my mother, she says, oh my gosh, you're as busy as your brother. Oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you. So in her own way, she is proud of us. But she's going to point out if you haven't done something right. So that's just Mummy. Thank you. I love the questions as well.
Yeah, great. Questions always.
And
great.
you
There's
can
one at the
ask
back
of
as
any
well.
of the siblings if you want to ask Shashi or Smita about something,
Millie?
please.
Actually, one lesson I did learn from Mummy is no complacency.
No complacency. Yeah.
Never rest on your laurels because
Exactly.
Hi, good afternoon. It's a real privilege to be part of this premiere. Thank you so much for coming to Bradford and enlightening all of us with your lovely, lovely stories. Just truly appreciate it. One thing, well, we are all global citizens, but my root lies in Kolkata, and it was lovely to hear about Calcutta from the three of you. Could you just narrate a bit of lovely experiences from Kolkata, which you have heard from your
Kolkata
mom?
was our favorite city.
Thank you.
Is, not
It is
was.
our favorite
Thank
city.
you.
And my mother always, I have a Bengali friend when I say I love Calcutta, and he says he never did. And he was a Bengali, and he said, oh God, it's a city in a state of decay, So, but we loved it. We loved it, and we had, in some ways, most of our coming of age and, our growing up experience in Calcutta, because it was at a time when I moved to Calcutta. I turned 9 in Calcutta, so it was just before I was 9. She was, 21 months younger. He was 4 years older, so it was at a particular time in our life.
Age and stage, right?
Usually age and stage, and it is a time where you remember your childhood more. So that is another reason. But even today, I was at a literary festival in Kolkata, and my sister could see the excitement, and they put you up at the Park Hotel, which is on Park Street, for any of you who know Calcutta, and you're walking to your events, and it's just great. I'm walking past my old school, and so it's a great city. What I was going to say also is my mother, it was her favorite city as well. She's lived in Bombay twice, she's lived in Delhi, and she's lived in Calcutta, of the top metros in India, meaning the bigger cities. And she always said, there's no place like Calcutta.
But don't forget her charitable work began in Calcutta.
With Mother Teresa.
She
Volunteered
worked
with
with
Mother
Mother
Teresa
Teresa.
Shishu Bhavan. And she, in fact, the first time she visited me when I was with the UN in Geneva, she had a commission from Mother Teresa to go and check out half a dozen children who've been adopted by Swiss families. And I chauffeured her around various parts of Switzerland to call on these people and see how the Indian kids were doing. So she had this, she began sort of thinking beyond herself and beyond us in Calcutta as well. And Calcutta brings out the heart in people. So that really is true.
Yes,
That's
it's
lovely.
all of us.
I love that.
There's a question just here.
We have just one more time.
Oh,
Yes,
sorry,
please.
that gentleman has been raising his hand for a while, so two more.
Okay, we'll try and
Just two
squeeze
more.
two.
That one and this lady here.
I have to rush off to my next event after that, but two
You can
questions,
run,
sure.
Hi. So I'm just really curious to hear that you didn't actually let your mum read the book before it was published, and that really makes me speculate that maybe you were a bit worried that she would interfere.
Well, that is a very, very important question, and it does require an answer. It's not that I didn't make her read it. She was not interested in reading it before it was published. I did share only with my siblings and my mother the entire manuscript before I submitted it to the publisher. There were some small corrections in terms of timeline and dates and stuff that my brother was able to give me, my sister less so, I can't remember. I don't remember. But specifics about them as well. So, I told her, I said, were you vice president in school or president? I couldn't remember some of those things, so it was worth checking. Mummy said, no, that's okay, I'm not interested. And she, unfortunately, in the last 3 years, and this book has all come out it only came out last year in 2022, she's lost a little bit of her concentration. I don't know if it's because of COVID. I hate to sort of... She has read the book fully. She's read it twice. And in many ways, it's serving as her own memory, which is really wonderful. She goes back and reads it and remembers things about her childhood, and then will tell us more about it.
I was going to say, if you want to write a book about your parent, do it while the parent's alive.
And they can still remember it.
Yeah, we do it often after they're dead and we're missing them, and then now, what's the point? There's a point for us, but this is something else. But okay, last question very quickly, because you've got book signing to do.
I won't keep you waiting, but thank you. What's one characteristic or habit of your mother that each one of you, it's a question for all of you, that you have instilled in your life? And
Smita sort of asked that question.
Sorry, what was that?
What quality or characteristic of your mother's
we
is
came
part
quite
of
late,
your
so we
everyday?
might have missed it.
Yeah, for me, the one I mentioned, this question of never be complacent. If ever I have a big success, the first voice that comes in my head is my mother telling me, time to move on to the next one. Don't sit around. So in a sense, it's a shame because you don't really lap up and bask in the glory of whatever it might have been, because there's always my mother telling me, not good enough, as it were. And so this thing of never resting on one's laurels, never being complacent with anything you've done, that's something which I certainly got from her.
Yeah, I would sort of agree that I also grew up feeling that, and that could have been something to do with our mother, I never thought that anything I did was really all that good. It took me, I've been writing for years and years. I wrote on the college paper. I've done all kinds of writing. I write poetry. I've been doing that. But I never thought, well, I don't have really anything to say to send it to a publisher. And in a sense, what you have to do is, despite our mother not allowing us to be complacent, we as children needed to sort of put that switch on where we say, it's okay, you do have something to say. You have what it takes. You can do it. So in my, 5-10 years ago, I told myself that I had things to share as well, and I did, and I've been very successful with all the books I've been writing, children's books, and that I've been able to publish with a lot of well-known publishers. But it's that quality she gave us both the self-doubt, but she also gave us the confidence.
I suppose, as you asked all three of us, I should also give you my learning from my mom. And I always have this song that she sings, whatever you can do, I can do better. And what she's saying is that instill a sense of self-belief, a sense of self-confidence in myself, that if you can do it, I can also achieve it. I can also try and do it. And to me, that's really, really important. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you all very, very much. We've run out of time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the questions as well. And thank you, Smee.